Queen Camilla has faced storms before, and she has managed to survive many scandals. But this time, things seem very different. Reports claim she was caught leaving the UK after shocking revelations were uncovered on her private estate, and the news has sent waves through the monarchy. Many believe this could be one of the most damaging scandals to hit the royal family in years, as questions swirl about what was truly found behind closed gates. Could this be the secret she hoped to hide forever? Or is it only the beginning? Join us in this video as we uncover the full story. The hidden secrets in Camilla's private estate. It all began on what was supposed to be an ordinary gathering at Ray Mill House, Camilla's private estate in Wiltshire. The atmosphere was meant to be calm and elegant because the event was organized as a small charity reception, one of those gatherings where people dress gracefully, exchange polite conversations, and raise money for causes that appear noble on the surface. Yet sometimes, the most shocking discoveries happen in the most unsuspecting moments when a servant stumbled upon something out of ordinary, a missing royal heirloom once belonging to Queen Elizabeth II. This single discovery immediately raised questions about what else might be hidden within those walls. Was it a coincidence or the beginning of something far more explosive? Keep watching to find out. The news spread quickly through the house, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted from calm to tense. Guests whispered to one another, servants exchanged worried glances, and people began to wonder how such an item could possibly have ended up there. Princess Anne was present at the event, and known for her stern personality and her deep loyalty to royal tradition, she wasted no time in making her feelings clear. Anne confronted Camilla directly, and her words cut through the room like a blade. Those harsh words carried more than just anger about the heirloom. They carried decades of rivalry, resentment, and personal history. For years, Anne and Camilla had tolerated each other in public, but deep down, they had never truly accepted one another. And in that moment, all the bitterness bubbled to the surface. The clash between Anne and Camilla was not something that could be smoothed over with polite smiles or royal protocol. Their voices rose, and though the details of their exact words remain private, witnesses described it as one of the most tense and open confrontations the family had faced in years. Even Prince William, who made a brief but noticeable appearance, could not hide his grave expression. His face showed the weight of what this meant, not only for Camilla but for the family's already fragile reputation. King Charles stood nearby, visibly shaken by the accusations hurled at his wife. For a man who had fought for decades to have Camilla accepted, this must have felt like a nightmare resurfacing. Within hours, a secret family meeting was held behind closed doors. Nobody outside those walls knows exactly what was said, but one thing was decided immediately: Ray Mill House would be searched thoroughly. A discreet yet detailed inspection took place, with every room carefully examined. But to the surprise of many, no other missing treasures were discovered. Only the one heirloom had been found. That made the mystery even more troubling. Why was that single piece of history at Ray Mill? How long had it been hidden there? And most importantly, what did it mean for Camilla's already complicated place within the family? This was not just another tabloid scandal, or the kind the royals often brush aside with silence. This was a direct confrontation inside the family itself, a moment that peeled back the fragile surface of unity and revealed the deep cracks that had always been there. It reminded everyone that Camilla's journey into the royal circle had never been smooth, and trust had never been whole. And with the spotlight once again shining on her estate, it was clear that her world was unraveling in ways she could no longer control. But to understand why Anne's accusations felt so sharp and why the discovery at Ray Mill House struck such a nerve, we need to go back decades to the tangled web of relationships that tied these individuals together long before Charles and Camilla's marriage. The feud between Anne and Camilla is not something born overnight. It stretches back to the early 1970s, when both women were connected to the same man, Andrew Parker Bowles. Before Camilla ever married Andrew, he and Princess Anne shared a romance. Their relationship was known within royal circles, and while it never blossomed into marriage, Anne and Andrew remained close over the years. There was an unspoken fondness between them, a bond that, though subtle, lingered in Anne's life. When Camilla eventually married Andrew, many insiders believed that Anne viewed her as someone who had stepped directly into her personal sphere. It was not open hostility at first, but it created an undercurrent of tension that quietly simmered. For a while, the issue remained in the background. Anne and Andrew maintained their friendship. Camilla settled into married life, and on the surface, everyone carried on. But when Camilla later re-emerged as Charles's companion, despite his marriage to Princess Diana, that old resentment returned with greater force. To Anne, it was as though Camilla had crossed another line, not only by marrying Andrew, but also by stepping into the most significant relationship in the royal family. And what may have started as quiet discomfort transformed into a deep skepticism, and eventually into outright distaste. Anne had always been known as a woman of discipline, loyalty, and duty. She respected tradition and valued honor, while Camilla, in her eyes, represented something entirely different. To Anne, Camilla seemed like a figure who took rather than gave, someone who disrupted the natural order of things. That sentiment became painfully visible during Charles's coronation, where despite the public show of unity, insiders described Anne as cold and distant toward her sister-in-law. This personal rivalry was made even more complicated by the early love quadrangle that connected Anne, Andrew, Camilla, and Charles in the 1970s. It was a time of shifting relationships, whispered secrets, and choices that echoed for decades. Charles himself had feelings for Camilla long before his marriage to Diana, but the royal family stood firmly in the way. They believed Camilla was unsuitable as a future queen consort because she was not considered aristocratic enough, and she was seen as too experienced compared to the image of purity they wanted for the heir to the throne. However, to understand why the royal family saw Camilla as someone who is unfit for the role of a future queen, we need to go back to her early life, how she met Charles, and how their love turned into a royal scandal. So, stay tuned as we delve into this. Camilla's struggles for legitimacy. Camilla Rosemary Shand was born on July 17, 1947, in London, and she grew up in a family that was privileged but not royal. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, had been a decorated soldier during the war, and after that, he worked as a wine merchant. Her mother, Rosalind, came from a wealthy family that carried aristocratic blood, since her father was the third Baron Ashcombe. This meant Camilla's upbringing was comfortable, and she had access to the kind of social circles that connected the upper classes of Britain. But she was not part of the royal world. She spent her childhood moving between their family's country estate in East Sussex and their home in South Kensington, London. And from an early age, she stood out for her lively personality. Unlike many who might have been shy in high society, Camilla was always confident, fun-loving, and comfortable around people. She was educated both in England and abroad, spending time at schools in Switzerland and France. This gave her a certain polish and charm, but she was not known as a brilliant student. Instead, she developed a reputation for her wit, her easy laugh, and her ability to hold attention in a room full of people. These qualities later made her a natural fit in royal circles, though at the time, nobody could have guessed how central she would become in the monarchy's most dramatic chapter. During the late 1960s, Camilla began moving in the same social world as Andrew Parker Bowles, who was a young army officer then, and was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in London. They started an on-and-off relationship that lasted for years. Andrew was dashing, handsome, and well-connected, and his closeness to the royal family meant Camilla's path began to cross with royals too. Through these circles, sometime around 1970, Camilla was introduced to Prince Charles at a polo match. The story goes that their first meeting was relaxed, even playful. Camilla is said to have teased Charles about his family connections by joking about her own great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, had famously been a mistress to King Edward VII, Charles's great-great-grandfather. Whether that was true or not, it showed the kind of bold humor she was known for, and it immediately caught Charles' attention. Unlike many young women he met, Camilla was not intimidated by him. She treated him like a man rather than a prince, and this natural ease between them quickly blossomed into something deeper. Charles was smitten, and the two grew closer. But while their relationship was strong in those early days, the royal family did not see Camilla as a suitable bride for the heir to the throne. Prince Philip and Lord Mountbatten, who both had a strong influence on Charles, reportedly believed he needed a wife who was not only aristocratic, but also considered pure in the eyes of the public. In their view, Camilla had dated too openly and did not have the kind of spotless reputation that would make her acceptable as queen consort. At the time, the monarchy was under pressure to uphold old-fashioned ideals, and Charles's choice of a wife was expected to reflect that. So, while Charles was sent away for naval duties overseas, Camilla's relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles became more serious again. And by 1973, she married Andrew in a grand wedding attended by the Queen Mother, Princess Anne, and other royals. Charles, still in love with her, was left heartbroken, and yet the connection between them never truly disappeared. Over the years, even as Camilla built a family with Andrew and Charles, began dating other women, including Lady Diana Spencer, they stayed close friends, and that bond eventually reignited into something more. When Charles married Diana in 1981, the world celebrated what looked like a fairy tale union. Diana was young, beautiful, and adored by the public. But behind the scenes, Charles's feelings for Camilla remained strong, and their contact never fully stopped. Whispers about their relationship began to circulate almost immediately, though the public had no proof at first. The palace denied rumors, and royal protocol tried to maintain the image of a happy marriage, but the truth was more complicated. By the late 1980s, Diana herself was aware of Camilla's continued presence in Charles's life. Tensions grew between the couple, and Diana famously referred to the marriage by saying, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." That statement captured the emotional reality of the situation and made it clear that Camilla was at the center of Diana's pain. Everything escalated in 1993 with the scandal that became known as Camillagate. A secret telephone conversation between Charles and Camilla from 1989 was leaked to the press, and it was deeply embarrassing for the royal family. The call contained intimate and personal remarks that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Once the transcripts were published by tabloids, the private affair was exposed in the most humiliating way possible. The public reaction was explosive. Many were shocked not just by the fact of the affair, but by the crude and awkward intimacy of the conversation itself. Charles faced widespread criticism for betraying Diana, and Camilla became the target of intense hatred. Overnight, she went from being a background figure to being painted as the villain in the downfall of the Prince and Princess of Wales's marriage. The media fed on this scandal for years. Tabloids used cruel nicknames for Camilla, with one of the most infamous being the Rottweiler, a term that Diana herself reportedly used. Headlines portrayed her as manipulative, unattractive, and unworthy of Charles. Every detail of her life was picked apart, and she was constantly compared to Diana. who by then had become the people's princess. While Diana was beloved around the world, Camilla was vilified as the woman who had stolen Diana's happiness. For Camilla, the 1990s were brutal. She could hardly appear in public without facing scorn, and her reputation sank to the lowest point imaginable. The monarchy itself was under strain, with public trust damaged by the messy divorce between Charles and Diana in 1996 and the years of tabloid scandals. And yet, through it all, Charles and Camilla's relationship did not end. If anything, the adversity seemed to strengthen their bond. They continued to see each other, though much of it was done quietly and carefully, as both tried to weather the storm of public anger. Many believed that the scandal would be the end of them, that the pressure would force Charles to cut ties completely. But that never happened. Instead, he stood by her, and she remained loyal to him, even as the world turned against them. And despite the ridicule, despite the anger, and despite the constant attacks, Camilla remained by Charles's side. Their relationship, forged in secrecy and tested by scandal, endured through it all. Over time, the public mood began to soften, though slowly and with hesitation. After Diana's tragic death in 1997, the narrative began to change again, though Camilla's role in the story was still complicated and often resented. But here's the most interesting part, so stay tuned. The path to rehabilitation and acceptance. After Diana's tragic death in 1997, everything about the relationship between Charles and Camilla became even more complicated. Public grief over Diana was immense, and it spilled over into anger toward both Charles and Camilla. Many people blamed them for the breakdown of Diana's marriage and saw them as partly responsible for her unhappiness. In those early years after the accident, Camilla had no choice but to remain in the shadows, because any appearance by her in public alongside Charles would have been considered insensitive and even disrespectful to Diana's memory. For a while, the idea of Camilla ever becoming accepted seemed impossible. But time has a way of softening certain feelings, even if it's slow. While many still viewed her with suspicion, small changes began to happen within the royal family itself, and those changes were important in preparing the ground for Camilla's eventual rehabilitation. One of the most telling signs of this came from Prince Philip. Known for his blunt advice and straightforward opinions, Philip had never been one to mince words when it came to family matters. It was once noted that during the most difficult years of Charles's marriage to Diana, Philip wrote letters to his son, urging him to try to make the marriage work for the sake of the children and for the stability of the monarchy. Philip had long believed in duty above personal happiness, and he expected Charles to keep trying. However, Philip was also a realist. When it became clear that Charles and Diana's marriage could not be repaired, Philip reportedly told his son something significant. He expressed that if Charles could not make it work with Diana, then he should do the honorable thing and marry Camilla. This was not a casual remark, because Philip understood how controversial Camilla was at the time, and the fact that he was willing to say this showed that, deep down, he recognized that Camilla was not going away. His words hinted at a gradual acceptance, not just of her presence in Charles's life, but also of the idea that the monarchy would eventually have to face the reality of their relationship. Even with Philip's reluctant acknowledgement, the path toward acceptance was far from simple. Camilla was still viewed by much of the public as the woman who had caused Diana pain, and the press was still merciless in its coverage. This is where the so-called charm offensive came into play. Royal aides knew that if Charles and Camilla were ever to have a future together, then public opinion needed to change, or at least soften. And so, a carefully managed public relations campaign began. A key figure in this effort was Mark Bolland, a royal aide who worked closely with Charles. He understood that the public would not accept Camilla overnight, So he created a strategy that was deliberate and cautious. The idea was to slowly introduce Camilla into public life in ways that seemed natural rather than forced. Instead of grand appearances, there were carefully staged moments where she would be seen supporting Charles at private functions or casual outings. The press was quietly invited to cover these occasions, and gradually the tone began to change. However, one of the biggest hurdles was Charles's own sons, William and Harry. After Diana's death, their feelings toward Camilla were complex, and understandably so. It was not easy for them to accept the woman who had been such a central figure in the breakdown of their parents' marriage. Royal aides knew that without William and Harry's acceptance, the public would never accept her either. So the process of introducing Camilla to the boys was handled with extreme care. Meetings were arranged in private, and the pace was slow, giving them time to adjust. Over time, the relationship between Camilla and the princes improved, though it was built on mutual respect rather than closeness in the early years. This careful approach sent a message to the public that if William and Harry could accept her presence in their father's life, then perhaps others could as well. The public relations campaign continued step by step. Camilla began appearing in more public settings, and her image was softened by stories that emphasized her loyalty to Charles and her quieter qualities, rather than the harsh caricatures that had defined her in the tabloids. She was no longer only the Rottweiler of the 1990s headlines. Instead, she began to be portrayed as someone who had endured years of ridicule but still stayed devoted to Charles through it all. It was a slow change, and it was working. However, the turning point came in 2005 when Charles and Camilla finally married. Their wedding was not like the fairy tale spectacle of Charles and Diana's in 1981. Instead, it was deliberately modest, reflecting both the sensitivity of the situation and the desire not to provoke public anger. The ceremony took place at Windsor Guildhall as a civil service, which in itself was unusual for a future king. Because Charles was divorced and Camilla was divorced, the Church of England faced a delicate situation. As head of the church, late Queen Elizabeth II could not attend the civil ceremony, nor could Prince Philip. Their absence was noted, but it was balanced by what followed. After the civil ceremony, a service of prayer and dedication was held at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. The Queen and Prince Philip attended this service and hosted a reception afterward, which sent a clear message of support. This arrangement was symbolic. While the Queen and Philip could not endorse the civil marriage in person, they showed their acceptance of the union through the blessing and the celebration that followed. The compromise showed the lingering complexities of the situation, but it also marked a major step forward for Camilla. For the first time, she was publicly recognized as Charles's wife, and the royal family as a whole was seen supporting them. Another key part of Camilla's rehabilitation came through her work with charities. Far from being a mere background figure, she began to take on causes that mattered deeply to her and the royal family. One of the most significant was her involvement with the Royal Osteoporosis Society. This was not a random choice, because Camilla's mother, Rosalind, and her grandmother had both suffered from the disease. Camilla had seen firsthand the devastating effects it could have, and she made it her mission to raise awareness about osteoporosis, promote early diagnosis, and support research into better treatments. Her personal connection to the cause gave her work an authenticity that people respected. Beyond osteoporosis, Camilla also championed literacy, encouraging both children and adults to read more, and promoting libraries and book clubs. She supported initiatives that tackled domestic violence, giving survivors a voice and shining a light on an issue that was often hidden in silence. These causes allowed the public to see another side of her, not just as Charles's partner, but as a woman who cared deeply about real problems affecting ordinary people. But here's the most intriguing part of all this, because it changes Camilla's role in the monarchy in ways many people never expected. From princess consort to queen consort, and the lasting impact of controversies. When Charles became king in September 2022, Camilla's public identity changed from the Duchess of Cornwall to the person who would be known officially as queen consort, and that change carried real historical and constitutional meaning. A queen consort is the wife of a reigning king, and while she takes the title and the public role that comes with it, she does not hold the sovereign powers that a ruling monarch does. In other words, a queen consort supports her husband's duties and represents the crown at many events, but she is not the head of state in her own right, and she has no constitutional authority to govern. This distinction is rooted in centuries of royal tradition, and it matters because it separates ceremonial status from political power. That difference is worth pausing on for a moment, because people often use the word queen without remembering that there are two very different meanings. A queen regnant rules the country in her own right, like the late Queen Elizabeth the same did, and she has the legal status of head of state. A queen consort, by contrast, has the rank and role that comes from marriage to the sovereign, and the role is largely public and symbolic rather than governmental. The British monarchy has a long list of queen consorts across history, and their job has usually been to support the monarch and to carry out charitable, ceremonial, and diplomatic work, rather than to exercise power. And one of the most important moments that cleared the way for Camilla to carry that title came not from tabloids or polls, but from Buckingham Palace itself. In February 2022, late Queen Elizabeth II used her Platinum Jubilee message to say something that many observers called decisive. She wrote that it was her sincere wish that Camilla should be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king, and that statement carried huge weight because it came from the reigning monarch herself, and because it closed a long-running question about how Camilla should be styled in future. The sentence was short and formal, but it mattered because the Queen's public endorsement made Camilla's future role official in the eyes of the institution. Even with that royal blessing, public opinion did not flip overnight, and the palace knew it. Polling around 2022 showed a mixed picture, with significant numbers of people still holding negative feelings about Camilla while many others were neutral or positive. These mixed numbers showed that while the legal and ceremonial decisions were being made at the top, the court of public opinion moved more slowly and remained a factor in how the monarchy presented itself. That reality is important because it explains why the palace continued to be careful and deliberate about Camilla's public role, even after the Queen's message. When Charles did succeed to the throne on September 8, 2022, Camilla became Queen Consort in title, and the couple later took part in a coronation ceremony that followed royal tradition. The coronation at Westminster Abbey is the ritual where a new sovereign is anointed and crowned, and tradition also allows for a queen consort to be crowned alongside her husband. That centuries-old ceremony links modern monarchy to long history, and Camilla's coronation was handled in a way that reflected both continuity and sensitivity to the public mood. However, even with titles official and ceremonies complete, the old stories about Camilla have not entirely disappeared. The British tabloid press has a long history of amplifying royal scandals about her, and from the Camillagate tapes in the early 1990s to the relentless coverage of other family dramas, those cycles show how a single discovery or allegation can be framed as proof of a longer narrative. In short, even after formal acceptance, a public figure's past can be used as a lens to interpret every new story. So, do you believe Camilla's past will always haunt her, no matter how much she does for the monarchy? And could this discovery mark the beginning of an even bigger royal scandal? Drop it in the comment section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, Click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.